Hey guys, this is Eric, and before this episode starts, I want to announce that we here at Punchboard Pagoda will be fundraising for Tap Cancer Out, a jiu-jitsu-based charity raising money for cancer organizations as part of the 2025 Global Grappling Day. Our fundraising page for this event can be found in the show notes for this episode, as well as over on our website. If you can help us raise funds, that'd be awesome and greatly appreciated.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of our podcast series. Today I'm going to talk about starting combat sports or training or returning to combat sports as an older novice. The middle-aged combat sports novice is an observed species. A high percentage of new faces in our BJJ or judo classes are men 35 and older. This pattern has a few explanations. A sneering observer will credit the masculine midlife crisis. Let me be clear, I do not subscribe to this explanation, but that story goes that as youth sloughs away, the insecure and unfulfilled male of the species will reach for signifiers of stereotypical youthful masculinity, an effort that psychoanalytical critics might label with a word that includes phallics as a prefix in some way. The sports car, or the violent surrogate activity, replaces the dwindling phallus. Another explanation that I've heard ad nauseum credits repressed homosexual desire. The desire to be close to young, strong, masculine bodies. But if I'm speaking with my teacher voice, those explanations are too simple and don't admit individual experiences. If I'm reacting with my shitposter voice, those explanations manage somehow to be distinctly stupid and ignorant at the same time. Really, the allure of combat sports for aging participants is simple. As people, note here the deflection away from gendered stereotypes. As people get into their 30s and beyond, we often have time for more leisure activities as any hypothetical kids become less helpless and or as work shifts from a post-university early career mode into long-haul cruise control. At the same time, many people lose interest in partying and turn towards healthier lifestyle choices as their doctors start saying things like, "Let's talk about your blood work." Combat sports are a good answer for a lot of people in this situation of having some free time to fill and of needing more exercise. Generally pretty affordable, if you let it be affordable. It's typically on a flexible schedule. You don't need to commit to a team's calendar. It doesn't have a season. You can walk in as a beginner at any time. You don't have to worry about it letting people down. And it's sociable. Combat sports have a lot going for them as fitness activities outside of the kicky punch and hug fights themselves. By the way, to keep arguing with the person who isn't here, if you're one of those people who assumes that combat sports people are toxic, I should rephrase before I strawman too much because those people are unlikely to be listening to this show. If you ever have to deal with one of these people who assumes that combat sports people fit the stereotype of the toxic bro and deride it as homoerotic, tell them off because they're being a bully in the simplest, most literal sense, and they're not doing any favors for anyone, least of all for our non-cishet friends or for the many women who participate. Shout out to all of our jiu-jitsu aunties and judo mums. We love you. Keep coming out. But allow me to shift back to the question of physical activity because that's really what most people are trying to get out of the martial arts. Pretty much any physical activity is good in the sense that it has health benefits. And those are big health benefits. Exercise is like the number one predictor. Throw all your superfoods out, just exercise. But those of us who have aged out of gym class or intramurals have relatively few options beyond the put in the headphones and work out activities if we're trying to bootstrap fitness. Thus, if you know someone who is seeking a way to get active, be supportive, whether it's cycling, dance, boxing, judo, or whatever else. There are a lot of psychological and social barriers preventing inactive adults from getting out there. I will come back to those at the end. But someone on a path of self-improvement doesn't need more doubts about how they will look, or doubts about where I want to focus now on the risks of the chosen activity. It doesn't help to see these things being reinforced by strangers online or even worse, by the people close to them. So be positive if you see somebody wanting to try something out, if they're getting active. Be positive, be supportive. Besides, all activities have risk. Running is hard on the hips and knees. Cycling puts you in traffic or on rough trails. I've gone over my handlebars while trail biking. Shout out to my helmet. Wear your dorky ass helmet. Don't get me started on the killing field that is rec league hockey. Golf can give you tennis elbow somehow, in addition to the drunk drivers on the course. I once yacked my rotator cuff at a hot yoga session. Now, this is not to suggest that being active generally is risky all around and thus to be avoided. We need to get physical, especially as we age. Those of my middle-aged friends who are chronically inactive have just as many, if not more, chronic injuries and are in worse overall shape than those of my friends who get out there and do shit and break bones. I'm not trying to smear these other sports either, except for hockey. I'm just encouraging a realistic view of the risks of activities so we can make fair comparisons. You can get into fling golf instead of Muay Thai if you want. I'll be very happy for you. Just don't drink and drive on the course, and I don't have much more to say about fling golf. Whatever you want to do is fine. So where does this leave combat sports? Well, we have risks too. Obviously, striking sports have elevated risk of concussion and chronic head injury. I'll come back to that. There are risks on the knees in all grappling arts, but really to all joints and to the neck and back. That's not great, obviously, but combat sports have weird advantages over, say, hockey in this respect. Hockey, my nemesis and the target of all my most unfavorable comparisons. Hockey as a game has the object of wearing skates and putting the puck in the net. That's the game. The rules permit roughness, but that roughness is incidental to the core game objective. Even on low-contact versions of hockey, people get slammed into the boards, there's risk on the skates, there's high speed. All of these things add up, and this roughness leads to injury, and it's incidental to the core game objective. Injuries, and there's a lot of injuries even in kids in rec league hockey, those injuries happen away from the strategic and tactical edges of the game. They're less controlled. Similar things happen in basketball, all three kinds of football, and to a lesser but non-zero degree in baseball and softball. In all of the major popular team sports, there are injuries from contact, from blowing knees, from jumping, from being active. Injuries happen. In combat sports, the logic is reversed. The objective of competitive physical superiority centralizes attacks on the opponent's body because that's the game. We never lose sight of it because it's the thing we're doing. As a consequence, these sports have been built from methods of mitigating and preventing injury. Sure, striking has concussion risk, but if you go to a Muay Thai class, you'll be kicking pads, not people. Jiu-Jitsu has lots of drilling, and it has the tap. Judo's origin is as a sport to allow people to throw each other to the ground for hours per week and keep doing that dumb shit for a literal lifetime. It rules. This focus on safety determines how people progress in these sports. Judo begins with the break falls. Newbies shouldn't roll in BJJ, and white belts don't do leg locks. What separates a novice boxer from an expert one is defensive acumen. Just look at the accuracy stats for World Championship bout. Go Bud Crawford. Look at those stats and reflect these are the most accurate hands in the entire world. That's how good the advanced boxer's defense is. Good coaches, they know this, and they teach the beginner to defend before sparring is on the table, and again, that defense needs to improve before any hard sparring. And not everybody spars. Because injury is always in focus and on the minds of the participants, a lot of the training becomes active, intentional, best practice work to avoid injury in a way that's not true of non-combat sports. If we beat the hell out of each other, when we're practicing these sports, we can't do it every day. We want to do it every day, so we do everything we can to avoid beating the hell out of each other while learning as much as possible. Combat sports coaches are better prepared to prevent, mitigate, and respond to something going wrong. At least the good coaches. Have you ever fallen down during a basketball game? Has a basketball coach ever taught you how to break fall? The long-term prospects for combat sports are also grim. Muhammad Ali's and Gary Goodridge's Parkinson's, Mark Kerr's addictions. There are rumors right now about top-tier BJJ personalities secretly getting around with a cane. But this is the key point of the day. You, listener, you are the hobbyist beginning one of these activities as an adult. You're not going to be eating hooks from Joe Frazier or getting your leg twisted by Lachlan Giles. If you make the right decisions and approach combat sports with the right attitude and with realistic goals, they can be safe as any other athletic hobby and safer than many. And they can give you benefits that you won't get elsewhere. When you go in, just don't forget that you are there to go light, get a sweat, and have some stupid fun. So let's talk about mindset. Usually when that term gets tossed around, it's coming from a hole in some talking head who wants a few $1,000s for the secret of how to stop being a loser and believing in yourself so you can buy a tacky car, move to Cancun or whatever. This is not that. This is the opposite of that version of mindset, in fact. This is not a believe in yourself sort of thing of willing the world to be the world you want. The mindset that you need to bring to combat sports is that you're not a champion, you're not number one, you're doing this as a hobby, and so lots of people will be able to beat you. This is fine. Being a champion is not the point. and it's going to be the outcome for a vanishingly small number of people. This is one of these things that I said before that I was going to get to later. I'm still going to get it later, but we're following this thread. Being champion is not the point. I'm not going to do the math, but think about how many people make it to the Olympics in sports like judo, wrestling, or boxing. It's one athlete per division per country, to give a rough idea. And because the Olympics cycle, 1/4 of an athlete per year at your weight class gets to go. If you're picking up these sports older than about age 10, none of those quarter will be you. It's probably not going to be anybody you know. Don't even worry about it. But this negative assertion is not a pessimistic one. This absence is liberating when we mix it with another dumb fitness cliche. The shouty people love to shout that to be a champion, you need to train like a champion. But conversely, if we're not going to be a champion, we don't need to train like one. Most of the significant physical harms in combat sports come from the mega high-intensity prep for competition. At most levels, in fact, competition ends up being a game of who can train the hardest, who can spar the most rounds, who can pack up more muscle and cut more weight, who can better train through the pain. My old boxing coach repeated that the first 10 amateur fights get decided almost entirely on cardio, so training for the fight becomes a mental exercise in doing more cardio rounds than you imagine your opponent can do. Many of the injuries of high-level competition come from the intensity of training, and the chronic injuries are so bad because they're aggravated when the athletes ignore the acute hurts. But we're a hobbyist. If you want to compete as a hobbyist, that's fine, just keep this in mind. If you set realistic goals and you train with a sensible intensity for those goals, which, practically speaking, means tapping early, minimizing weight management, letting things heal, we can keep those high-profile problems away. I'll use myself as a test case example as a mid-40s BJJ brown belt judo Nidan. That's Nidan, second-degree black belt for you non-weebs in the audience. I'll use myself as the example. I don't compete much. I just don't enjoy it. I've done it before, whatever. I train 5 to 6 times per week in the gym. When rolling in jits, I tap to control, not to breaking pressure. If I'm in an arm bar, what determines my tap is how much I can move. If I'm stuck, I don't need to wait for the extension before I call it. If my arm is locked up, I'm in spider web, my arm is still bent. Once my grip is broken, that's when I tap. Okay? It's the same thing for leg locks. If I can't move and they have my heel, I tap. I don't need to wait for them to twist it. This doesn't mean I don't fight things or try to escape. It just means that I don't need pain to tell me that the battle has been lost. In judo, I let people throw me in randori. It sounds simple and dumb, but that's it. I let them throw me. It prevents a ton of injury because things don't escalate. If I accept the throw, the landing is softer and it's more controlled. My defense is positioning, timing, evasion. If I let strength get into it to resist throws, what would have been an easy break fall becomes a crater slam as my opponent's strength comes into play because they're trying to counter mine, whether it's on this throw or now that they've learned that they need to really huck me to get me off my feet on the next one. This is escalation. We're trying to avoid that escalation. I go light. I let them throw me. In either sport, the idea is that I don't care if I lose because nobody wins or loses in training. I only lose if I can't make it to the next practice because I got hurt. I roll like I'm 70 so I can roll when I'm 70. This is what it means to say that it's a marathon, not a sprint. Now, as a senior belt, I have another lever I can pull because the way I interact with my training partners influences how they train with me and with each other. This might be called leading by example. And once you're a purple belt in BJJ or blue belt, second Q in judo, because whatever that is in U.S. ranks, because the U.S. ranks are weird and has to be different from everywhere else. Either way, once you're purple belt, blue belt, once you're in that intermediate advanced level, to be an example becomes a responsibility. And it's important for the health of your club and for the development of your training partners. The way you function as an example to the newbies is a million times more important than any technical feedback you can give them. So, to be an example, the first thing I do is tap. I have tapped to a white belt, and I've been thrown by a yellow belt in the last month. By tapping, I teach my training partners that not every round is a death match, and there's no face to be lost by tapping. By tapping, I teach them that they don't need to go after senior belts with fire and force. The second thing I do is give compliments. Grappling is a really funny sport when it comes to practical feedback. The natural positive reinforcement becomes weird in grappling. If you're in basketball, you're doing basketball, you're practicing your free throw, you get the feedback on how good your aim is on every single shot. Either the ball goes in or it doesn't. You tried something, you immediately see how good you did. Okay? Grappling, like if you're grappling with me and you're a white belt, and you're in my guard and you defend my pendulum sweep and then you avoid my omoplata, you still might find yourself being armbarred in the same sequence a second later by what I call my hot dog armbar. Happens all the time. I eat white belts alive with this. Not a brag. The point is, from the white belt's perspective, all that they see is the armbar. They know that they were in my guard and something happened and they got armbarred. As the brown belt, I can see that the white belts survived that long because they kept good posture and balance, they kept their arm out of the initial danger, and they don't recognize that the danger that got them was because they did the right thing, right? They did the right thing of keeping their arm out of the omoplata position, but that let me get the armbar. That armbar that led to the tap, it only happened because they did 2 or more things right. They did 2 or more good things and stopped my initial attacks before I caught them with the 3rd, 4th, whatever it was. When multiple successes chain up, but the end of the chain is failure, it'd be hard to notice those successes along the way. Okay? So I make sure to supply that feedback that the sport is intrinsically concealing from beginners. That armbar was 90% there, man. You just need to grip my hand instead of my wrist so I couldn't get my elbow out. That's the kind of thing that, in saying it, I'll protect my elbow in future rolls, because my partner won't try to solve the problem of me escaping every time by slamming the brown belt's arm as fast as they possibly can to armbar me before my escape happens. They need to beat me by having good technique so my escape simply doesn't work. They'll focus. I'm encouraging them to focus on the actual technical problem. This is how, as a senior belt, I control my risks in more ways. As an older beginner, avoid the young competitive meatheads and train with the advanced people who approach the sport with this attitude. But where does that leave us? I'm training like a wimp instead of a champion, so what remains for us to get out of combat sports? And there's quite a lot. Fitness, obviously. Self-defense is a big one, though I love annoying people by repeating that because more people will find themselves in the hospital because of a fall than because of an assault. That break falls are actually the best self-defense training. That annoys the Muay Thai people so much, but then the Muay Thai coach gets me to teach them break falls so they don't get hurt when they're tripping each other. Circle of life. But this is the place for me to add another tangential rant. Participation on its own has value. If you're one of those people who rants about participation trophies ruining the kids these days, please shut up. That rant is toxic and it's damaging to the world. It's damaging to the whole world to teach kids that it's only worth doing things if we win. Showing up is actually hard enough on its own, and we should acknowledge people who show up. Because if we don't acknowledge kids who show up, it teaches them that it's not worth showing up as an adult. Right? I might suck at grappling compared to other people in my experience and rank, but I participated long enough to call my shot on an untrained person. If I have somebody new and I want to ankle lock them or arm bar them or rear naked choke them, they can't stop me because I've been doing this long enough. I've shown up. I'm not going to win any sort of championships, but I've learned a lot because I've shown up, and then I can teach what I've learned to other people. There's the value. Anyway, we can also get social benefits in our relationship to our combat sports team. Yes, we have a team. It's just not the same kind of team as on a soccer field or whatever. We all help each other improve. And there's a lot of satisfaction in helping people to meet their goals. I wish everyone the pleasure of seeing a training partner escape your favorite move when they're against somebody else in competition. I get a big dopamine from that because it tells me that, number one, I helped my friend to hone that defense, and number two, I'm probably better at that move than at least somebody else, at least than their opponent is. It's a good dopamine hit. It's really fun. And that's really the kick I get out of competition, is in helping other people get there. Because it's a team, but it's a team without a schedule or a season. It's one in which every member has the freedom to choose their own position and should be appreciated for giving what they can. That 1/4 of an Olympian gets carried there by hundreds and maybe thousands of others who directly or indirectly help them develop into the champ. They're carried there by their coach, their coach's coaches, they're carried there by their training partners, their opponents' coaches, and it goes on. Every one of these people, and probably a whole bunch of others who I didn't categorize, these people contributed something to the Olympian. Jogaro Kano, the founder of judo, he had a term for this, and it's usually translated into English from Japanese as mutual welfare and benefit. And Kano he takes me to my last point, too. You can find a quotation from him on Wikipedia from late in his life where he asserts that he didn't care much about getting judo into the Olympics because a purely competition-focused version of judo would be a retrograde form. And by the way, I know better than most. I know better than you, listener. I know better that a Wikipedia reference is garbage. I did actually put quite a bit of effort into tracking that quotation farther back than that, but I couldn't get my hands on the book that Wikipedia cites, and I couldn't get my hands on it in time to finish the script. The quotation on Wikipedia is contextualized. The quotation's from a 1936 letter from Kano to Gunji Koizumi, but the citation refers to a book about U.S. judo by Brous and Matsumoto, so even if I got that book, I would probably have to run another layer of acquisition to get my hands on the primary source anyway, so I didn't do it. I judged it, I decided it wasn't worth it, but I'm still interested. This is all to say that if you have either the Brous and Matsumoto book on U.S. Judo, and you can give me the reference to the letter, even just take a picture, transcribe where their citation of the letter so I can find the publication info. Or if you know where I can find the letter in full, please reach out. I'd love to have that information. It's one of my favorite ideas. Anyway, primary, secondary sources aside, this is tangential. Retrograde art. That's where we were. Retrograde art. This statement reveals that competition was only a part of the picture of judo in Kano's mind. By the way, if you don't know who he is, he was basically patient zero for any martial art that has any kind of connection to Japan, or that we think of as traditional. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, karate, taekwondo, they all owe something or another to him, even if it's just the belt system. Tangent. Okay, retrograde. Kano encouraged shiai, competition, and that's the Japanese term for competition is shiai. He, like us, understood that for a martial art to have validity as a fighting system, the martial part of it, for the martial art, that martial art needs pressure testing against fully resisting opponents. But he also knew that there had to be other things in judo for it to be the lifelong activity he envisioned. If it's just about competition, if it's just about fighting, it becomes an activity for the young. He wanted this lifelong thing, and this lifelong activity, the rest of this stuff, is the art of judo. So, by the way, if you're not familiar, judo is a compound word, and do is this Japanese term for art or way. The suffix do is applied to tea ceremonies, flower arrangement, and a whole bunch of other different arts in Japanese culture. And so judo is gentle art. The art of judo is about the continued practice, the self-cultivation, and so forth. That's all of that Mr. Miyagi stuff. We've heard all of that before, that martial arts is about discipline, self-cultivation, and the like. But has anybody ever explained for you what any of that stuff actually means? Has anyone translated it from mysticism into a practical statement? I'll do you the favor right now. Art, self-cultivation, and so forth means that these martial arts are activities that have value because they can't be mastered, but at which a participant can always improve. Perfection doesn't exist, because there's always a new self, a new challenge, and a novel idea. I have taught basic judo to hundreds of people. It admittedly can become a stale experience for me, but I'm always delighted when I find a new detail or method of illustration. Just last night, we were drilling foot sweeps, and one of our good yellow belts, somebody who competes, he's very athletic, he's good at jiu-jitsu as well. This guy was having trouble with his diashi burai, his foot sweep, because he was pushing his opponent away on a horizontal line. He was pushing him away on the sweep, which allowed his partner, his uke, with that push away, it gave uke an opportunity to limp link out and retain the footing. I suggested that he envision tossing uke's head back behind himself instead. So if he had uke's hand in his uke's sleeve in his left hand and uke's lapel in his right hand, it would be toss with your right hand, toss his head kind of over your left shoulder. And the foot sweep started working better because he was no longer assisting his partner's escape. I love that kind of thing. The detail of focus on throwing his head this way instead of that way is wonderful. There's another example that came from Eric's recent podcast episode on curriculum. He gave the example of Lego hands, the way of illustrating C grips to kids. I say Minecraft hands when I want kids to rotate while keeping their hands rigid in front of their faces for example, a Tayatoshi. These vocabulary improvements are marginal, but they're rewarding gains that come from time to time. And this is part of the dough. Big moments of newness happen too. I recently gave a one-on-one judo lesson to a one-arm grappler. That was an experience. I learned so much about how much I assume, about how I use my body in different ways I never thought about it. He and I, we learn things together. We can find novelty every time out, and this path can go on forever if we let it. Okay. A world champion is a champ. They're the champ, they are the best. But that world champion is not possessed of perfect knowledge of the art, even though they're one of the best at the sport. They don't have perfect knowledge of the art because they don't know what it's like to grapple in your body with your limitations at your age and after the day you had. All of that, that's for you as the older novice. That's for you to explore. That process is the challenge. And gaining that perspective is that self-cultivation. The attitude to stick with it, that's the discipline. The learning is the road. The learning is why we're there. That's the art. That's the way. That's the dough. Powerlifting, the goal for many is number go up. In running, the goal is time go down. In hockey, the goal is team win. More goals, right? As we age, those things slip away. Number go down, time go up. Team need younger, stronger, faster. But on the mats, there's always someone who can go light. There's always a question yet to be answered. Always a new way to put a physical motion into words to describe a solution to a problem. And there should always be a place for you. One of the last times I spoke with one of my childhood judo instructors was at a pottery studio. I was taking an elective in undergrad. That's why I was doing pottery. I like making things. I moved away for grad school shortly after this. He was off the mats by then because he'd experienced a stroke that had taken away some of his mobility. He moved away from judo. That's okay, right? He was in his late 70s. He had passed club leadership on to others. But because of this stroke, he had more or less lost use of his left arm. He wasn't doing any sports at all at this point. The pottery studio, he couldn't even throw clay on the wheel anymore. So he was learning how to slab build using a rolling machine. He couldn't use both of his hands on the clay, so he was using this machine that he could operate with one arm. And he was figuring out how to make things with one arm. He was having a great time learning new things about his art and working around his new limitations. It was a new puzzle. Something that we might look as a disability was the new challenge for him, just like judo had been the challenge for him before. He was going at it with the same attitude. So he was having a great time there, and we're hanging out making things. He's telling me cool stories about math, judo stuff. I tell a lot of the stories in judo, actually, that he told me in those times that we were working in the clay studio. But there was always something to learn, something to share. He was no longer flipping suckers onto the mat. He was no longer getting ippons. He was still flipping clay, all the same, and he kept with that until the end of his life. And that pathway, that learning, is what combat sports offer to the older participant. It's not a sport about fighting. It's a physical activity where we also can learn, and it happens to include fighting. In that respect, it shares more with ceramics or woodworking, painting, music, gardening, and that we do it to improve. We always seek to get better at our art, knowing that perfection is a mirage. With that romantic image, I'll leave it. Go out, get on the mats, have fun. Don't be scared. Go through the door. They'll be glad to have you there. I'm Neil for Fight Island, fightis.land. I'm posting about cold soup and inappropriate use of collectible mugs at weekendwarrior.bsky.social.